Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The British pound hits a one-year high against the US dollar as UK inflation fails to ease. Chances of a rate cut seem to be receding.
On other headlines, Israel continues to intensify its attacks across Gaza. Hamas says civilians are in the front line as dozens more people are killed.
Former rivals who once described Donald Trump as unelectable give him their full backing at the Republican National Convention.
And come on in, the water's lovely. The mayor of Paris takes a dip in the River Seine as the city gears up for the Olympics.
The British pound has hit a one-year high against the dollar as UK inflation failed to budge. Chances of an August rate cut dropped after the annual rise in the cost of living held steady at 2% in June, missing expectations that it would fall. Inflation in the services sector remained steady at 5.7%, partly because of hotel prices, which rose 8.8% annually. Some analysts said that extra demand caused by Taylor Swift concerts was a factor. Meanwhile, average annual inflation for countries using the euro fell to 2.5% in June, down from 2.6% a month earlier. In the Eurozone, Finland, Italy and Lithuania had the lowest inflation rate at below 1%. Belgium, Romania, Spain and Hungary had the highest, with inflation ranging from around 3.5% to 5.5%. Let's talk now to Fiona Sincossa, who's an analyst from City Index. Good to see you, Fiona. Welcome back to the programme. Let's start with the Eurozone, where overall inflation is down slightly. Are those numbers going to change anything for the European Central Bank?
So I think, it's encouraging numbers in the sense that it's moving in the right direction again. We had seen an acceleration in inflation in previous months, so the fact that it's cooling again will be well received by policymakers. The ECB interest rate decision is tomorrow. These figures are not likely to make the ECB move and encourage them to cut rates tomorrow. Instead, they're going to want to see more data to confirm that inflation is cooling in the right direction towards that 2% target, and we're thinking that they could potentially prepare the market for a rate cut in September.
Well, let's look at the UK, where we also had some inflation numbers out, unchanged at 2%, and those figures are something of a surprise.
I think that there was a little bit of an expectation that we could see inflation cooling to that 1.9%, but the service sector inflation has been very sticky, and that's something that we know that policymakers have been watching closely. I think there is this sense that maybe the Taylor Swift Erasmus tour has really encouraged sort of more sticky levels of inflation. If we look into the numbers, we can see that sort of hotel and restaurant spending has been a lot higher this month. But I think, the Bank of England will continue to watch those service sector inflation figures. They will want to see those to come down before they really start cutting interest rates.
They want those figures, the service sector inflation, for example, to come down. When do you think that might happen?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think we are expecting to see it come down, but very gradually. And I think for that reason, they don't want to be jumping into cutting rates prematurely for fear of inflation obviously going back up. But the other thing that the Bank of England will be watching will be wage growth, which again is staying sticky around that 6% level. We've got wage growth data due tomorrow, so the Bank of England will be watching that as well. But the expectation is that the central bank could start to cut interest rates potentially in September.
Could start to cut interest rates maybe in September. Well, let's talk about the pound then. We've seen that break the $1.30 mark for the first time in a year. What's behind that, and do you think it will go higher?
Yeah, so basically what we're seeing here is the strength in the pound has come as investors have reined in Bank of England rate cut expectations. So at the beginning of this week, there was about a 50-50 probability that the Bank of England could cut interest rates in August. That's now been reduced to around a 30% probability. And as those expectations have been reined in, that's boosted the pound, especially against, for example, the US dollar, where we're seeing the markets are actually increasing expectations that the Federal Reserve could cut sooner. So we're now seeing 100% probability of the in the markets of the Fed cutting interest rates as soon as September. So that has boosted the pound. There is a potential that we could see that go higher, the pound go higher against the US dollar, especially if we do see strong wage growth tomorrow and a slightly more hawkish sounding Bank of England at the 1st of August when they meet.
Fiona, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Fiona Cincotta from City Index.
The German cabinet has approved a budget for next year with an $18 billion black hole. The finance minister, Christian Lindner, is expecting an economic growth package to generate an extra $6.5 billion. But he says Germany needs to set an example by showing fiscal discipline. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Peter Oliver, who's in Berlin. Peter, the German finance minister saying that sticking to borrowing rules shows Germany is an anchor of stability in Europe. How does that square against this $18 billion black hole in spending?
It's no small matter, is it? That's this gap between the spending plans that they've put out, the projects they want to put money in, and the money that's literally in the budget. $18.55 billion is the gap between the two. Christian Lindner, very unfazed about this when he was speaking to the media. He said that this is going to be the norm for German governments from here on out. There is, on one side, perhaps a little bit of hope that the initiatives that they've put to try and rekindle the economy into this budget can do exactly that and get the German economy out of this cycle of stagnation and recession that it's been in for way too long. There's also, on the other hand, quite a bit of potential that this is because they're going to kick the can down the road until it's not their job to look at it anymore. We're going to have a federal election here in Germany next autumn. It's very unlikely that the current government will be coming back together. The three-party coalition of the Social Democrats, of Olaf Scholz, the Green Party, and Christian Lindner's Free Democrats, they have had a lot of problems getting anything done together. And they're all really looking ahead to that election next year with the hope of who can stick the knife into their current coalition partners the best. What Christian Lindner was more focused on was getting out the message that he's the finance minister that's stuck to the debt brake. This is the policy that's enshrined in the German constitution that means governments shouldn't borrow more than 0.35% of GDP. That's designed to stop Germany falling into a debt spiral like we've seen in countries like the United States. He will be using that when it comes to the federal election next autumn, and it certainly seemed where his focus was when he was speaking to the media.
That's the big picture stuff. Let's just drill down on the specifics on this budget, because there's a big cut in aid, for example, for Ukraine. Why is that?
They just can't afford it. That's what Christian Lindner said. They will have given around $9 billion in financial aid directly to Kiev in 2024. Next year, they're going to cut it right down to just under $4.5 billion. So they're going to halve the amount that's given. What Christian Lindner said is that this slack would be taken up by the G7 initiative that is going to use the proceeds, from frozen Russian assets in order to provide Kyiv with around $50 billion worth of loans. Christian Lindner saying Germany just doesn't have the cash to be able to give them, but they're hoping that the financing for Ukraine will be able to come from other means that Germany's a part of.
Peter, thank you for that. Our correspondent Peter Oliver in Berlin.
Renationalising the railways, building more homes and a publicly owned green energy company.
Some of the plans of Britain's new Labour government set out by King Charles in the state opening of Parliament. 40 new bills were announced, with many focused on improving economic growth and living standards. There was also a promise of closer relations with Europe.
My government will seek to reset the relationship with European partners and work to improve the United Kingdom's trade and investment relationship with the European Union. My ministers will seek a new security pact to strengthen cooperation on the mutual threats faced by the United Kingdom and the European Union. My government will play its part in trying to secure long-term peace and security in the Middle East.
Trading in the Dutch chip maker ASML has been suspended after its shares fell more than 10% in 2 days. Stocks in other chip makers, such as Nvidia and TSMC, have also declined sharply. Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York. John, what's going on?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's a bad day for the tech industry right now, and this is very much a NASDAQ and an S&P 500 story, really. Not so much the New York Stock Exchange where we are and the importance that we place on the Dow, because the Dow is in the green, but the NASDAQ and the S&P, as you will see in a minute, sharply selling off right now. And the reason is the Biden administration is apparently going after companies and countries that continue to sell high-end microchips, those very, very high-end microchips, to China. Now, Bloomberg is the source of all this, the news agency. They say that in addition to all the other restrictions placed on China when it comes to buying and selling microchips, and goodness me, I seem to report on this almost every week on this program, despite all of that, the administration is looking at mounting the most severe available restrictions. And what they're going to do is they're going to use something called the Foreign Direct Product Rules. And basically that allows the administration in Washington to get in between companies all the way around the world, including the Netherlands and Japan, for example, and stop them selling these chips to China. Now, it's not guaranteed that they're going to go ahead with this, but there is another angle to this as well, because President Trump up in Milwaukee and Wisconsin at the convention has been telling business people apparently that he thinks, should he get in November, that he wants to make Taiwan pay for the production and the protection that the United States gives that particular country. So for all of those reasons, we have a massive tech sell-off now. So let me explain. First of all, ASML, based in the Netherlands, it's the biggest supplier of equipment to chip makers. Shares, they had pretty good earnings this morning. They were okay. They were really not bad, but now the shares are down more than 11%, and because they're down more than 10%, they're going to be restricted here over the next 2 days. The whole of today and the rest of tomorrow as well, particularly affects the short sellers. Then you've got Taiwan Semiconductor down 7%, Nvidia, of course, down 6%, Broadcom down 6%, and then all the big tech names that you know and love, all of them being severely hit. Meta Platforms down $20, Microsoft down $9. And it raises many, many questions. In fact, there are more questions than answers. One of the questions is, have all these previous moves not worked? Are they all ineffective? Why is the Biden administration going ahead with this? Will it present diplomatic challenges to friendly countries like Japan and the Netherlands? Why is it coming so late in the day? Because potentially Biden only has 4 months left in office. Certainly the polls suggest that at the moment, although I would caution you, this election is coming down to a very, very slim slice of American voters, and neither man is guaranteed to win in November at this point. On top of this, people on Wall Street want to know what the short and medium-term policy for this kind of microchip provision is. And finally, if Trump does win in November, then he's likely to be just as tough, if not tougher, and there may be inflation implications down the road, just at the point that inflation here is getting under control. For all of those reasons, okay, leave the Dow out of it for now. The Dow is above 41,000, a gain of about 0.5%. But the S&P 500, where these chip stocks live, along with 500 others, is down 1.3%. And listen to this, the NASDAQ, where they originate, is down almost 500 points. So it's a pretty serious tech sell-off, or put another way, maybe, if you've got the money, a buying opportunity.
John, I want to ask you about Elon Musk's SpaceX and X, which are both going to relocate. Has there been any reaction to that?
Yes. You bet there has. Now, there's a very famous country song called All My Exes Live in Texas. It's by George Strait. And George Strait is a very popular country singer, and that song you hear on the radio all the time here. And now, all Elon Musk's exes will indeed be living in Texas, just like the song, because he's moving SpaceX to the Starship Orbital Launch Pad, or the Starbase production site in Texas, in Brownsville. And he's moving X/Twitter out of San Fran and into Austin, which is where the Gigafactory is, and basically Musk is fed up with California. And he said so in a tweet. He's fed up with the high taxes there. He's fed up with the laws and the way of life. And the final straw for him was a bill passed by Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, in the last couple of days, which basically stops schools from telling parents if one of their pupils requests a change to their gender identification. Now, I will tell you there is a school district in California that is already suing the governor for this, saying that schools have no right to have any secrets withheld from parents of children who attend their schools. So it's a very, very controversial issue. Each of us will obviously have our own views on this. But from California's point of view, if Musk does this, if he does do this, there are serious implications for tax, of course, because California needs the money, like we all do, and they will lose it. They will lose it. And also, of course, Elon Musk is in the process of basically reincorporating all his companies away from Delaware, where most companies start in this country, to Texas, which is a very long way away from Washington or New York, and where things are likely to be a bit easier for him. And that follows that pay row, where a judge stopped his 2018 pay increase. Tesla board recently reinstated that, but it's still holed up in the courts. Guys?
John, thanks very much. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York.
HSBC has appointed George Eldery as its new group chief executive. In September, he'll replace Noel Quinn, who's leaving after 5 years. Eldery was only promoted to his current role of chief financial officer 2 years ago.
Gold hit a record high on the increasing likelihood that the US central bank will soon cut interest rates. That's after Fed Chairman Jay Powell indicated he was more confident inflation was on its way to the bank's target. Lower interest rates make bonds and the dollar less attractive and gold more attractive as an investment.
Adidas has raised its full-year profit guidance for the second time in 3 months. Shares in the sportswear giant rose sharply in Wednesday's trade. The group now expects full-year operating profit to be over $1 billion. Adidas rival Nike last month issued a downbeat forecast for its own full year.
Donald Trump's former rivals for the Republican presidential nomination have given him their backing on the second day of the party's national convention.
Trump got another standing ovation at the arena in Milwaukee following Saturday's assassination attempt. Former presidential candidate Nikki Haley was both booed and cheered as she stepped on stage, having previously described Trump as unfit for office.
There are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them. My message to them is simple. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me. I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree.
The Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is in Milwaukee.
Nice evening for Donald Trump on the second night of the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee. He had the chance to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the many hymns of praise, the endorsements, the praise, the acclamation from all sides, and that includes indeed his former fierce rivals in some cases. From former governor of South Carolina and Donald Trump's former ambassador to the United Nations, there came that very clear endorsement, but also crucially a call for her voters in the primary process, and there were a lot of them, to now vote for Donald Trump. But it was not just Nikki Haley who gave her endorsement for the first time here on stage in Milwaukee for Donald Trump. There were other political rivals, erstwhile political rivals of Donald Trump, who also took to the stage here, the likes of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, for example, or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, or Florida Senator Marco Rubio. All of them would have loved to have been in Donald Trump's position here tonight. All of them criticized Donald Trump at length at some point in their attempts to become the Republican presidential nominee. All of them were insulted by Donald Trump. All of them were given nicknames by him as well, but still they came here on stage on this second night and praised the former president and gave him their clear endorsement.
Republicans, though, promising a message of unity, particularly after the assassination attempt. Halfway through this convention, how do you sense it's going?
Well, look, the unity within the Republican Party going just fine. Everybody rallying around Donald Trump, more so than ever, particularly after that assassination attempt on Saturday in Pennsylvania. That might have been too expected. But yes, you're right to ask about the calls for unity generally, because they came not just from the Donald Trump campaign and indeed the former president himself, but also from President Joe Biden in the Oval Office. Now, he, for example, is back on the campaign trail, and he is again criticizing Donald Trump. Now, that's to be expected. But here at the Republican convention, maybe there is a little bit less of the name-calling of Joe Biden from some of Donald Trump's closest allies. But still, he's being ridiculed at length. Videos being played here last night of Joe Biden losing his balance or losing his train of thought. Yes, he's still being ridiculed here by Republicans, and he was yesterday being held firmly responsible for what Republicans say is a wave of crime due to illegal immigration into the United States. It's not like the gloves are off again necessarily, but this is, after all, a presidential campaign, and I think things will get a little bit ugly very soon indeed again.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Attacks continue in Gaza. Dozens more killed, with the United Nations saying schools are being targeted.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
These people are the lucky ones. These migrants made the dangerous crossing to Europe in a small boat and were picked up by the Italian authorities. Many people who try to reach Europe have to be plucked from the sea when their boat capsizes or sinks.
This boat had around 30 people on board.
Hundreds of people desperately hoping for a new life in Europe. The thing is, there are huge amounts of people in Europe, particularly on the far right, who do not want them on this continent.
Thousands of migrants allowed to enter without permission, who end up crowding out the slums of our towns and cities.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Israeli strikes have killed more than 80 Palestinians across Gaza in the last 24 hours. Israel has stepped up its military offensive in recent weeks, saying it's targeting areas where Hamas militants are hiding.
At least 8 United Nations-run schools sheltering people in Gaza have been hit in the last 10 days. Palestinian health officials say the majority of the casualties are civilians.
There's nothing but destruction as far as the eyes can see. They flatten the entire neighbourhood. Buildings have been toppled on top of people's heads. Shame on you, Netanyahu. Shame on the whole world. Have some mercy on us. We want the Arab countries to stand by our side. We don't want aid. We want them to support us to bring an end to this outrageous situation we're facing. This is a war of extermination. They didn't spare the young nor the old. What do children have to do with this? You are planting hatred in this generation, and you will have to bear the consequences.
Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in Khan Yunis in Gaza.
Continuous, ever-intensified strikes everywhere in the Gaza Strip, technically everywhere in the Gaza Strip, given that some of them took place in the Gaza North, some of them took place in Gaza City, and even in different parts of the Gaza City, Al-Rimal neighborhood, Al-Shaja'iyya, Al-Sabra, Al-Daraj, Al-Tuffah, and the number of people who were killed is also increasing. Also some bombardment in different parts of the Gaza Center area. Al-Maghazi refugee camp, which is part of the Gaza Middle area, Al-Burej refugee camp, and Nusayrat refugee camp that has been witnessing ever-intensified bombardment for the last 2 or 3 weeks that has claimed the life of around 150 Palestinians. Also, Khan Yunis area has been seeing widespread destruction and also bombardment when Abasan in the very east of Khan Yunis was targeted just a couple of hours ago, and also other areas in central Khan Yunis were targeted. Also in Rafah, around 10 bodies were retrieved, and around a dozen of other Palestinians came to the field hospital. Some of them were severely affected by the bombardment and by the attacks that were conducted by unmanned drones. In the last 2 hours, around 35 Palestinians were killed, and the overall number of Palestinians killed every day now has been increasing. Today there were 81 Palestinians killed, yesterday around 65, and the day before around 101, and the civilians are the ones who are bearing the brunt of that ongoing bombardment and of the intensification of the bombardment that has been further destroying the Gaza Strip and leaving it inhabitable. The UN has been making appeals for the international community and for Israel as a warring party to stop those measures and to try to take into consideration the need to those civilians to rest and respite after the ongoing bombardment have left them almost with nothing.
The leader of Hezbollah has warned that the armed group will expand its attacks if Israel continues to strike what it says are civilian targets in Lebanon. Let's talk to our correspondent, Sarah Coates, who's in Tel Aviv. Sarah, what did the head of Hezbollah say?
Hello there, Robin. Hassan Nasrallah making a televised address threatening to hit Israeli towns, villages that haven't yet been hit by rockets and drones if Israel continues to, what he says, target civilians inside southern Lebanon after a number of deaths on that side of the border over the past few days. And this is an extremely worrying area. We were on with you yesterday in that northern town of Rosh Pinna, right when rockets were being fired from the southern Lebanon area into these northern communities that are largely evacuated. A massive barrage last night, more than 20 rockets fired into Israeli territory, and there is so much pressure, Robin, on the Israeli government to restore the security situation in this northern area. We're talking tens of thousands of displaced people from these border towns that are scattered right around the region, and they say that the government is simply not doing enough and that they want to go home. But within the international community, there is, of course, a lot of concern that this tit-for-tat escalation that we're really seeing on a daily basis now could become a wider regional war that could also potentially draw in these Iranian proxies from around the region.
So pressure on the Israeli government then, and that pressure on the Prime Minister doesn't seem to be easing.
Not at all. He is under pressure from all fronts. There was actually a leak a little earlier today coming out in Hebrew media after Netanyahu held a security cabinet meeting here in Israel last night. He allegedly said that the hostages are suffering, but they are not dying. These are 120 people still being held in the Gaza Strip, and the families, the loved ones of these people, they are absolutely furious. They're asking Netanyahu to apologise. We're also hearing from the opposition leader, Yair Lapid. He's come out to say that Netanyahu needs this upcoming trip to Washington to actually pin down a deal, to say we agree to this deal. Otherwise, he said, you need to nix this trip. Now, also, of course, pressure from the far right-wing elements of his government not to do a deal with Hamas. And again, also on the streets last night here in Israel, massive protests, ultra-Orthodox people turning out, rallying, clashing with the police after this latest conscription bill was passed, which will see more of these religious people that Benjamin Netanyahu does rely on to keep him in power. And they are saying we will not go to the IDF, with a note coming out saying that potentially 6,000 of these young, ultra-Orthodox men will be drafted very soon.
Sarah, thank you very much. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the Seine is safe for swimming. It's official, so says the mayor of Paris, ahead of the Olympics.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be, CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The British pound hits a one-year high against the US dollar as UK inflation fails to ease. Chances of a rate cut seem to be receding.
Our other headlines: Israel continues to intensify its attacks across Gaza. Hamas says civilians are in the front line as dozens more people are killed.
And former rivals who once described Donald Trump as unelectable give him their full backing at the Republican National Convention.
China is the world leader in adopting generative artificial intelligence. That's according to the US tech company SAS, which says more than 80% of Chinese business leaders surveyed are using generative AI to help run their companies. That compares with 65% in the United States. The global average, by the way, is 54%. In 2023, there were over 380,000 generative AI patent applications in China, 6 times the number in the United States. And that perhaps reflects the strength of the global market, which is expected to be worth $1.3 trillion by 2032. Well, a new artificial intelligence video generator has been unveiled by Tsinghua University in China. Known as Vidu, it's being touted as a rival to OpenAI's Sora system. It's one of many new artificial intelligence tools emerging in China. Our correspondent Jen Copestake reports.
Large-scale AI models are creating new ways of working. Powerful tools for data analysts can help companies create content with the aim of grabbing audience share. In China, public opinion platform GS Data is using AI to analyze nearly 90 days of online data to identify the most popular topics among its users and forecast future behavior patterns. It says it knows how users feel about content, with a sentiment index claiming a 70 to 80% success rate of predicting emotion.
Behind this, we have a strong team of skilled AI algorithm engineers providing support. First and foremost, we require massive data sets that are meticulously labelled and processed. With accurate labels, our unique algorithms enable us to analyse this extensive data and derive the results we desire.
Beijing's Tsinghua University recently unveiled Vidu, a video generation competitor to OpenAI's Sora system.
Vidu utilizes our proprietary technology architecture. Sora does not disclose its technical roadmap. We have been developing core technologies such as deep artificial intelligence and diffusion models independently.
Vidu creates 16-second-long HD videos with a single click and can understand and generate content specifically aimed at Chinese users.
For example, the dust billowing up we see as the car moves and the sunlight and shadow effects at different times of the day can be rendered quite realistically. Another feature is it can comprehend some of the language of multiple camera angle utilization and focusing and light tracking effects, even some illusory scenes you can envision.
Such large language models help content creators save time in editing by understanding different formats and recommending music. And this technology can even replicate humans in creating digital anchors, mimicking individual characteristics like voice, lip movement, and lifelike facial features.
The generation of digital people is actually very simple, roughly divided into 2 steps. The first step is to clone your image. The second step is to clone your voice. We only need to collect some of your video footage.
Users of digital human products can use text to generate new content, allowing digital characters to speak in multiple languages. These developments come with ethical challenges and regulatory issues. One example is reviving dead celebrities or swapping the faces of well-known people. Balancing innovation with necessary compliance will be critical as these new technologies expand rapidly. Jen Copestake, CGTN.
Well, let's talk to Santosh Rao, the head of research from Manhattan Venture Partners. Santosh, welcome back. Good to see you. We've been watching pictures of a panda playing a guitar. I'm not sure whether or not you're going to be able to top that. Anyway, how significant is Vidu?
It is significant. Good morning, guys. Good afternoon. It's great to see you all. Generative AI is transformative, and that's probably an understatement. It's going to be, and it's well established, well telegraphed. So now we are moving to the third layer, third iteration. First was the infrastructure layer, where you get the chips in there, get the GPUs in there, and all that stuff. Now we're moving on to the applications layer, and that's still early days. We'll see a lot of development there, and Vidu is a great addition. It's a close second to OpenAI's model, Sora model, Sora text-to-video application. So I think it'll catch up. It's a great use of, it has many applications, many users across verticals. So you're going to see that more and more. It's still early days, I would say. And these things are as good as the models that the data that's fed into them. So they need to be trained very well. So there's a lot of work to be done. But it is very promising. It can do wonders. And it can disrupt a lot of stuff, especially in the entertainment industry, wherever there's video involved. So you're going to see a lot of applications come up. It's still early days, like I said, and it's a close second to OpenAI's model.
Well, let me just ask you about the comparative analysis and the competition. I mean, how does Vidu compare to other leading AI models like Sora, for example, in terms of the tech and the performance?
It's pretty good, but it's still behind. For instance, their videos are 16 seconds long. The Soros videos are 60 seconds, so they're much longer. It takes a lot of GPUs to make a single clip of 60 seconds. You need to run the chips, run the thing for 3 hours to get 1 minute worth of videos, so all that stuff. So this is still early days, so I think it's 16 seconds for, like I said, for Vidu. But slowly they will develop, as they do in every place, and it'll catch up at some point. But overall, I would say, compared to all the other ones, the money and the resources going into this application is going to be tremendous, because the applications, the use cases are going to be amazing. So you will see a lot of stuff. So I would say there is competition, as there should be, but right now these two are the leaders in this pack, and we'll see where it goes. But it's still a long way to go. And these things move very fast, actually. It's access to technology, access to resources. In that sense, China is limited, because U.S. has the best resources in terms of chips and software and all that. So I think that gap has to be closed. So as long as that gap is there, I think Sora will continue to lead the pack. But they're all running at a pretty hectic pace.
And what about the regional comparison, and how does Vidu reflect perhaps China's capabilities and ambitions in the artificial intelligence sector?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a key part of any country's arsenal. You need to develop it. Every country is going to use it. So generative AI is, it's more a productivity tool, I would say. And so you can't really live without it at some point. So they will use it across the board, and especially China will use it more and more, because they are tend to be isolated in many ways. So they need to create this whole setup for them. They have to do it alone in many cases, because they don't have partnerships across the board, like OpenAI's and the other applications, other companies in other areas. So I think in that sense, I think generative AI is going to be useful for them. But China's limitation is going to be it's going to be tailor-made to their needs, their own philosophy, their own political leanings, and all those issues are there. If you read some research reports, they are limited in that sense, as opposed to OpenAI's models, which are like open-ended. So I think that there are some limitations, and we know the general belief is that there need to be strong guardrails around it. There are copyright issues and a lot of fake issues, fake pictures and all that. So there need to be guardrails. So we need responsible AI versus just wild, the Wild West or AI. So we don't want to go there. So I think to the extent that countries can enforce that, have that in responsible AI in there, I think you're going to see tremendous development. And China is, of course, it's one of the leaders in technology, and they will be a strong second, and at some point we'll catch up if everybody doesn't stay on their A game.
Santosh, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the program again. Santosh Rai, Head of Research from Manhattan Venture Partners. The Mayor of Paris has gone for a brave swim in the River Seine to try and dispel fears over its water quality before the Olympics.
Over $1.5 billion has been spent in cleaning the river. Events including the triathlon and marathon swimming will be held in it. Let's talk to our correspondent Ken Brown, who is in Paris, though apparently not in the Seine, unfortunately. Ken, what's the reaction been to the Mayor going swimming?
Tempting, Robin, tempting. I think the reaction overall has been a positive one. Hidalgo, after all, is the first Paris mayor to achieve this. Swimming has been banned in the Seine for 100 years. Jacques Chirac promised to clean it up in 1988 when he was mayor and failed. And you could see the pride on Hidalgo's face when she emerged from the water today. She had a swim, a pretty long swim. It wasn't just a dip. She said it was a dream, and now it's real. A dream that's cost the French government and people $1.5 billion. And just over 2 weeks ago, they were still finding high levels of E. coli in the water. Finally, it does look like the water is okay for the Olympians and for the politicians too. Today, at least, as you mentioned, we'll have two events here, the triathlon and the open water swimming. That's like the swimming marathon. Now, we spoke to the Surfrider NGO, who are trying to keep the government honest by doing their own tests. Here's what they said.
Our samplings of the 4th of July showed that if they had to swim on the 4th of July, yes, it could have been good, and we hope it will be the same. But, for example, if there is heavy rain or local pollution, there can be issues and they will have to postpone the competition. So, yes, they will, but there is a lot of if right now.
So that's the concern. If heavy rain comes, which is forecast for the end of July, for example, around when the open water swimming is scheduled, then that could bring some bacteria released back into water and complicate things. So we might see events postponed. The worst case scenario for the triathlon is that they would cancel the water leg. It would become a duathlon. Not great news if you're an Olympian there. The swimming marathon could be moved to the Via del Sur-Mar Nautical Centre, which is just outside the city, within the Paris region, where the rowing and the canoeing is set to take place. But today, a positive day. The Seine is safe to swim in, and officials say that next year it'll be safe for everyone to swim in, Parisians and visitors. One of the planned legacies of the Games. Now, Robin and Jamie, I was planning to dive in here to finish off this live, a spectacular ending, but unfortunately I forgot to pack the Speedos.
All right, well, I'm sure we'll stage you in before the end of the Olympics, but for now, Ken Brown in Paris, thank you very much.
Oh, what a shame. Looking forward to that. A number of sports at the Olympics, as well as the opening ceremony, are due to take place on or in the River Seine. Our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
The River Seine flows through the heart of the French capital, winding past the Louvre Museum, streaming underneath the Eiffel Tower. It will play a central role in Paris's city centre games. The long-distance swimming and the aquatic leg of the triathlon are both set to take place in the river, as long as it is safe.
Regular tests on the river have shown that the levels of bacteria, especially E. coli, in the Seine have been a persistent problem in the months leading up to the Games, and it's been a real concern for organisers.
Speaking to CGTN, the head of the organising committee for the Olympics said there was no change to the plan for the events in the Seine.
We are still confident with the delivery of the competitions on the River Seine and the opening ceremony on the River Seine. We knew from the beginning that the plan that we decided was really aligned with the good conditions at the end of July, and we knew that we never tested this to make feasible during the winter or even spring.
But some Parisians have taken matters, or in this case magnets, into their own hands. Theo spends his free time cleaning the canals in the north of the city. He removes discarded metal objects, from wires and batteries to knives and even bullets from the water.
Là, par exemple, c'est une balle. Here we have yet another bullet. We often find them here due to the wars in the past. I think it's from a Colt 45 used by the Americans.
He is one of a number of people who do this in Paris, and he thinks the city authorities missed out by not letting magnet fishers help with the cleaning operation.
Je pense que si on l'avait fait 2 ans auparavant, I think that if we had done it 2 years ago, the river quality would have been a bit better. Not perfect, of course, as it's not just about objects polluting the river. It's mainly about bacteria and less about the objects. But I think we could have done better for the Olympics.
The Paris authorities have spent more than $1 billion on plans to make the river swimmable. A giant water tank has been built here underground. It will collect rain runoff and prevent wastewater from entering the Seine. The tank can hold the equivalent of 20 Olympic swimming pools of dirty water. If Paris does succeed in cleaning up the Seine, the project may become a blueprint for cities across the world. And the legacy ambition is that from next year, Parisians will be able to follow in the swim strokes of Olympic champions and bathe in the river once more. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
The US Democratic Senator Bob Menendez has been convicted of 16 charges of corruption. He was found guilty of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars, gold bars and car and mortgage payments in exchange for helping to divert American aid to Egypt. Menendez insists he's innocent.
At least 25 people have been killed in Peru after a bus they were travelling in plummeted down the side of a mountain. It's reported to have skidded off a highway, falling around 200 metres. At least 42 people are thought to have been on board. Several injured passengers have been taken to hospital.
Heavy rain has caused severe flooding in China's Shanxi province, with nearly 2,000 people forced to flee their homes. Livestock has been stranded and traffic disrupted. The region's on high alert, with emergency services in place to deal with the aftermath.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the long, slow decline of coal. China unveils plans to halve its coal emissions within 3 years.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. China has unveiled a plan to radically cut coal emissions. The number of coal-fired power plants in China has been rising to meet growing energy demand. Now Beijing says it expects to start reducing emissions, initially by 20% by the end of this year, and then by 50% before 2027, compared to 2023 levels. The reductions will be made through various ways, including more use of biofuel and green ammonia, as well as carbon capture technology. Well, despite the push towards green energy, coal remains the #1 source of China's power, generating around 60% of the total in 2023. Belinda Schepper is China policy analyst at the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Belinda, welcome. How significant is this announcement?
Thank you very much. The plan extends a lifetime to coal power by using technological means to reduce emissions. However, reforming the grid could be a more economical way of reducing emissions, allowing current coal power to support wind and solar energy. And as clean energy and energy storage develop, coal power generation will be increasingly replaced by renewables. And that will actually require a phase-down plan rather than the one we have seen now.
The first phase of projects aim, I think, for a 20% reduction in emissions per unit of electricity generated by next year, with a 50% reduction by the year 2027. How realistic are these targets?
I think it's important to clarify that both of these targets do not actually cover the whole fleet of China's coal power plants, but instead they only cover plants that are targeted for retrofits. And the plan does not provide us with clarity of what percentage those plants are of the fleet. So it's very hard to say, in other words.
Coal remains, of course, essential for balancing intermittent renewable energy sources, not just in China, but many countries around the world. How does China plan to balance its reliance on coal with this commitment to reduce emissions?
Yes, I mean, China plans to invest more in energy storage technologies, enhancing grid infrastructure and increasing the share of renewables in the energy mix. For the first half of this year, clean energy expanded by more than the rise in electricity demand, and that actually forced fossil fuels into retreat, and we've seen the largest drop in fossil fuels generation since the COVID-19 pandemic. So clean energy is really the key here, and we've seen a record generation of 44% in May coming from clean energy, and the coal share dropping to 53%. So renewables are really the way forward on that front.
All roads lead to 2060 on this subject. I wonder how this strategy from China on emissions reductions at coal plants fits into the overall roadmap for achieving carbon neutrality by 2060.
Emissions reductions have become a higher priority for the policy makers in China, and the previous coal power retro action plan primarily focused on improving energy efficiency. However, we've seen now a movement towards greater emphasis on reducing carbon intensity. Of course, the main solution to reducing emissions and realizing carbon neutrality will be shifting away from coal. So in the meantime, it makes sense to reduce emissions from coal plants that will remain in the system, and to do that also through technological means. And in addition, requiring coal power plants to implement emission reduction retrofits is actually going to make coal more expensive and thereby boost clean energy. However, I think the key thing to keep in mind is really to make sure that these carbon reduction retrofits do not become an excuse for China to keep building new coal power plants, and instead look to provide a clear pathway for the phase down of existing coal.
Belinda Shepherd, thank you very much for coming on the programme. Belinda Shepherd, China Policy Analyst at the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air.
Thank you very much.
The headlines again. The British pound hits a one-year high against the US dollar as UK inflation fails to ease. Chances of a rate cut seem to be receding.
Our other headlines, Israel continues to intensify its attacks across Gaza. Hamas says civilians are in the front line as dozens more people are killed.
And former rivals who once described Donald Trump as unelectable give him their full backing at the Republican National Convention.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
There's more on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.
Bye.